In the shadowed canyons of the American Southwest, where ancient spirits still whisper through weathered stone, a savage thunderstorm unleashes nature's fury. Lightning splits the dark sky, finding its mark in a settler woman's canvas tent. As flames devour the shelter, her screams pierce the thunderous night, but fear holds the other settlers back. Only one soul moves forward, an Apache scout, his heart guided by generations of fire ritual wisdom and the sacred songs of his ancestors. Through smoke and flame he charges, emerging with the woman in his arms, carrying her to a hidden spring, known only to his people. There, as rain washes the scorched earth clean, two worlds collide in ways neither could have imagined. But will the medicine ways of his tribe heal more than just her burns? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Sarah Mitchell's fingers traced the worn leather spine of her journal, its pages heavy with 3 months of frontier life. In Boston, she had taught literature to proper young ladies who dreamed of nothing grander than tea parties and cotton in parasols. Now, sitting before her tent in the settling dusk, she watched dust devils dance across the hard-packed earth of the Arizona Territory. The year was 1873, and at 38, she had already begun to see silver threading through her. Dark hair. Her students' mothers had whispered behind their fans about poor Miss Mitchell, unmarried and childless, destined to fade into spinsterhood within the brick walls of Beacon Hill. But Sarah had seen something different in her mirror. Not an ending, but a beginning. When the notice arrived seeking teachers for the Western Territories, she had felt it like a calling. Her father, a distinguished professor at Harvard, had called it madness. "The frontier is no place for a woman of refinement," he declared over dinner, his knife scraping against fine china, "especially not at your age." But Sarah had inherited her mother's quiet strength, the same resolve that had kept Elizabeth Mitchell's back straight through consumption until her final breath. The next morning, she had posted her letter of acceptance. The leather-bound journal had been her father's parting gift, pressed into her hands at the train station. "Write everything," he'd said, his voice gruff with unshed tears. "So when you come to your senses, you'll have a record of this adventure." Now, 3 months into that adventure, Sarah dipped her pen in ink, watching the Arizona sunset paint the canyon walls in shades of amber and rose. Her tent, simple canvas stretched over wooden poles, felt more like home than any Boston parlor ever had. She wrote of the things her father would never understand: the majesty of thunderclouds building over distant mesas, the sweet scent of desert rain, the way the stars seemed to hang so low you could almost reach up and pluck them from the velvet sky. But she also wrote of her fears, the ones she never voiced to the other settlers. The Apache made them all nervous. Sarah had seen them from afar, moving like shadows through the canyon lands, their knowledge of the terrain as natural as breathing. The other settlers spoke of them in hushed, fearful tones, clutching rifles and drawing their children close. But Sarah had caught glimpses of something else: mothers cradling babies, children playing games with sheep knuckles, old men sharing a pipe in the cool of evening. They were people, not the savages from dime store novels. Still, when the young Apache scout had first appeared at the edge of their settlement 2 weeks ago, offering to guide them to better water sources, the men had nearly shot him on sight. Only the intervention of James Cooper, their level-headed wagon master, had prevented bloodshed. The scout returned every few days, always keeping his distance from the main camp. Sarah had watched him from behind the safety of her books, noting how he moved with the fluid grace of a mountain lion, how his eyes seemed to read the wind itself. He wore a mixture of traditional dress and cavalry cast-offs, a sign, Cooper had said, that he worked sometimes with the federal troops. In her journal, Sarah sketched his profile one evening as he spoke with Cooper. High cheekbones, proud bearing, eyes that seemed to hold ancient wisdom despite his relative youth. She estimated him to be no more than 30, though life in these harsh lands aged a person differently than in Boston's gentle climes. "You should be more careful about staring at the savage," Martha Whitaker had warned her yesterday, voice dripping with practiced concern. "People will talk." But Sarah had long since stopped caring what people would talk about. She had left those constraints behind in Boston, along with her father's disappointment and society's narrow expectations. Here, under the vast Arizona sky, she felt the possibility of becoming someone new, someone true to the yearnings she'd always kept locked away. She wrote in her journal, "There is wisdom in these ancient lands that we, in our eastern arrogance, are too blind to see. The Apache scout moves through this harsh country as if reading a beloved book, every rock and bush a familiar word. What might we learn if we only had the humility to listen?" A cool wind stirred the tent flaps, carrying with it the sweet scent of creosote before rain. Sarah looked up from her writing to see heavy clouds building over the western rim of the canyon. They would need to secure the camp before the storm hit. As she rose to check her tent skylines, she caught movement from the corner of her eye. The Apache scout stood at his usual distance, but this time his gaze met hers directly. For a moment time seemed to stop. Then he raised his hand in what might have been a warning, pointing to the darkening sky. Sarah nodded her understanding, but found herself unable to look away. In that brief exchange, something passed between them, a recognition perhaps of shared outsider status. He among the whites, she among the rigid expectations of her time. Thunder rolled across the canyon like distant drums, and when she looked again, the scout had vanished into the gathering dusk. Sarah turned back to her tent, fingers still tingling from that momentary connection. In her journal that night, she would write, "There are moments when the walls we build between worlds become as thin as morning mist. What lies beyond them, I wonder? What treasures and truths might we discover if we dared to step through?" The storm was coming. Sarah Mitchell, no longer the proper Boston schoolteacher, felt her heart quicken with something that wasn't quite fear. Change was coming too, riding the wind like thunder, and she was ready to meet it. Running Cloud knelt beside the ancient petroglyph, his fingers tracing the spiraling path worn into red rock by ancestors long past. Above him, an eagle's feather hung from his medicine bundle, dancing in the pre-storm wind. White Hawk had given him the feather 7 summers ago, when he first began walking the path of a medicine man. "The eagle sees both worlds," the old medicine man had told him, his face weathered as the canyon walls themselves. "He flies between earth and sky, between the world of spirits and the world of men. This is the way of our people, to walk between worlds." Now, at 32 winters, Running Cloud felt the weight of those words more heavily than ever. The world was changing faster than autumn winds. The blue-coated soldiers pushed deeper into Apache lands each season, and with them came the settlers, their iron horses, their strange medicines. His own father had died defending these canyons, but White Hawk had shown him another way. "Sometimes," the old man would say, "the strongest warrior is the one who builds bridges, not walls." So Running Cloud had learned the white man's tongue, had studied their ways, had even guided their soldiers through the territories when they sought peace rather than war. The medicine bundle at his hip held more than just the eagle feather. Wrapped in sacred buckskin were the tools of his calling: sage for cleansing, cedar for prayer, stones from the sacred springs that held the power of healing. But alongside these traditional medicines, he carried something else, a small vial of the white man's fever medicine, given to him by an army doctor whose child he had helped save during a fevered night. White Hawk had not condemned this addition to his bundle. Instead, the old medicine man had nodded slowly, saying, "Power is power. The spirits do not care what color hand holds the medicine, only that it is held with a good heart." Running Cloud rose from the petroglyph, his buckskin shirt dark with approaching rain. The settler camp lay below, their white tents bright against the red earth like scattered eagle feathers. For 2 weeks he had watched them, especially the woman who wrote in her bound papers. There was something different about her, a quietness, an attention to the land that the others lacked. He had seen her watching him too, not with the usual fear or disgust, but with curiosity. When she sketched his likeness in her book, he had felt no offense. Unlike the others who saw only a savage, her eyes seemed to search for understanding. The Thunder people were gathering now, their voices rolling across the sacred peaks. Running Cloud felt their power stirring his blood, calling to the medicine ways that Whitehawk had taught him. The old songs rose in his throat. Songs of rain, of cleansing, of power that had been old when the first Spanish steel flashed in these lands. His people had retreated deeper into the canyons, away from the settler paths. Only he and a few other scouts remained to watch, to guide, to protect the ancient places. Whitehawk had insisted on this duty, even as younger warriors called for war. "The spirits have shown me," Whitehawk had said during their last meeting, his blind eyes turned toward the dawn. "Great change comes with the thunder. You must be there to shape it, Running Cloud. Some fires destroy, others cleanse and make way for new growth." Lightning split the sky, and Running Cloud's medicine bundle trembled with power. The eagle feather danced wildly now, pointing toward the settler camp. Among their tents, he saw the woman emerge, looking up at the dark clouds, with something like welcome in her face. In that moment, he remembered another teaching from Whitehawk. The spirits speak not just through medicine bundles and sacred songs, but through the hearts that are open to hearing. Sometimes, Running Cloud, the greatest medicine comes from the most unexpected sources. The first fat drops of rain began to fall, carrying the sweet scent of wet sage. Running Cloud gathered his medicine bundle close, its contents rattling with the power of the approaching storm. The woman below was securing her tent now, her movements sure despite the growing wind. Something was building here, beyond the thunders. Voice beyond the rain's blessing. Whitehawk's words echoed once more. "You will know the moment when it comes, my son. The spirits will make the path clear if you have the courage to walk it." The storm was nearly upon them. Running Cloud felt its power thrumming through the sacred objects in his bundle, through the ancient earth beneath his feet, through his own blood that carried the memories of countless medicine people before him. He began to sing softly, not a war song, but one of healing, of protection. The woman below paused in her work, as if hearing something on the wind. For a heartbeat, their eyes met across the distance. Then lightning cracked the sky open like a split drum, and everything changed. The storm broke like a stampeding herd across the canyon. Wind howled through ancient stones, carrying stinging pellets of rain that fell so hard they bounced off the parched earth. Sarah had just finished securing her tent's final guy line when the first massive lightning bolt illuminated the entire camp in stark white brilliance. The boom that followed shook the ground beneath her feet. Children screamed in nearby tents, and horses whinnied in terror, straining against their ropes. Through the chaos, Sarah felt an odd calm. She'd always loved storms, their raw power a reminder that nature cared nothing for human pretenses. But this storm was different. The air crackled with strange energy that made the hair on her arms stand on end. Her mother's old warning echoed. In her mind, "When the air tastes like metal, child, seek shelter quickly." Sarah ducked into her tent just as another lightning bolt seared across the sky. Through the canvas walls, she saw the shadow of her writing desk, the leather journal still open from her earlier musings. The metal nib of her pen gleamed in the strange light. Time seemed to slow. She saw the next bolt coming, not from above, but sideways across the canyon like a serpent of light. The air around her filled with blue fire. Her last conscious thought was of her father's words, "Write everything." Running Cloud was already moving when the lightning struck Sarah's tent. He had felt it coming in his bones, in the way his medicine bundle vibrated against his hip. The sacred objects within seemed to sing with power, warning, directing, commanding. The bolt hit with such force that it lifted the tent slightly before setting it ablaze. Canvas, being thing of white man's making, burned faster than buffalo. Hide. Through the sheets of rain, Running Cloud saw flames leap up like hungry spirits. Other settlers stood frozen, their faces pale in the firelight. Some called out in their Jesus God's name. Others grabbed buckets, but the rain made the ground treacherous, and fear made them clumsy. Inside the burning tent, a woman's scream cut through Thunder's voice. Running Cloud's hand found his medicine bundle. The eagle feather within seemed to pulse with each beat of his heart. White Hawk's teachings filled his mind. Sometimes the spirits place us exactly where we must be. It is our choice whether to accept their challenge. He began to run. The flames parted before him like a curtain. Heat seared his lungs, but the power in his medicine bundle spread through his body like cool water. His fingers found the charred tent flap, tore it aside. Through the smoke he saw her, the woman who watched, who wrote, who seemed to see with different eyes than her people. She lay crumpled beside her writing desk, unconscious but breathing. Her journal smoldered nearby, its pages curling in the heat. Running Cloud snatched up both woman and book in one fluid motion. The medicine bundle at his hip grew hot, almost burning through his buckskins. Then they were out into the rain and wind. Other settlers finally moved forward, reaching for the woman, but Running Cloud felt the power in his bundle surge again. The spirits were not finished. This was not the place of healing. Without hesitation, he turned and ran toward the canyon walls, carrying Sarah Mitchell in his arms. Behind him, voices called out in anger and confusion, but their words were lost. In Thunder's growing voice, the hidden spring lay less than a mile away, through a narrow cleft in the red rock that his people had used for generations. Rain made the path treacherous, but Running Cloud's feet knew every stone. The woman stirred once during their flight, her eyes opening briefly. Instead of fear, he saw in them a flash of recognition before unconsciousness took her again. The spring's grotto opened before them like a mother's embrace. Here, the storm's voice was muted, transformed into soft echoes of ancient stone. Water dripped from the ceiling in steady rhythm, gathering in pools that his people said were sacred. To the spirits of healing, Running Cloud laid Sarah gently on a dry ledge, then quickly began gathering what he needed. His medicine bundle, when opened, revealed its mysteries: sage for cleansing, cedar for prayer, stones that held the memory of countless healing songs. But the leather pouch that held these sacred items was scorched, marked by the same fire that had nearly claimed them both. As he began the healing songs, Sarah's eyes fluttered open. She looked first at the dancing shadows on the cave walls, cast by lightning that still played across the canyon's rim. Then her gaze found Running Cloud, and in that moment, something passed between them that transcended the barriers of language and culture. "You pulled me from the fire," she said in English, her voice rough from smoke. Running Cloud nodded, continuing his soft chant. He mixed white man's burn medicine from his vial with traditional herbs, creating a poultice that bridged both worlds of healing. "Your medicine bundle," Sarah whispered, watching him work. "It's burned." "Some marks are sacred," he replied in careful English. "They show where spirit touches earth." A small smile touched her lips despite the pain. "Like lightning touching canvas?" Running Cloud's hands stilled for a moment. Few whites understood such things, yet here was one who seemed to grasp instinctively what many of his own people took years to learn. "Yes," he said, "like lightning touching canvas." Outside, the storm began to ease, its fury spending itself against the ancient stones. But here in the grotto, beside the sacred waters, another kind of storm was just beginning, one that would change them both in ways that neither could yet imagine. Running Cloud began another healing song, older than the others, one that White Hawk had taught him for moments when worlds met and barriers thinned. Sarah's eyes drifted closed, but her hand found his medicine bundle, fingers tracing the lightning's mark upon the leather. In that touch, both felt the truth of Whitehawk's words. Some fires destroy, others cleanse and make way for new growth. Dawn came softly to the hidden spring, filtering through cracks in the canyon wall like strands of spun gold. Sarah woke to the gentle sound of water dripping into ancient pools, each drop carrying centuries of mineral wisdom. Her burns ached, but differently now, a healing pain rather than the sharp agony of fresh wounds. Running Cloud knelt beside one of the sacred pools, pouring water into a clay vessel that seemed to glow with its own inner light. The vessel itself was a testament to ancient craft, decorated with spiraling patterns that matched the petroglyphs. On the grotto's walls, in the dawn light, Sarah could see that these designs told stories, tales of healing, of transformation, of journeys between worlds. "This water," Running Cloud said, noting her gaze, "has been healing my people since before the Spanish came, before the horse, before iron." He spoke English with deliberate care, each word chosen like a stone for building a bridge between their worlds. Sarah pushed herself to sitting, wincing slightly. "It feels different here. The air itself seems to heal." A slight smile touched Running Cloud's lips. "The old ones say this place was born from Mother Earth's tears when she wept for her children's pain. Each pool holds different medicine." He dipped the clay vessel into another spring. "This one for body." He moved to a smaller pool. "This for spirit." The morning light strengthened, revealing more of the grotto's secrets. Sarah saw bundles of drying herbs hanging from natural stone shelves, their fragrances mixing with the mineral-rich air. Small offerings, beads, feathers, carved stones, dotted the ledges, each telling its own story of healing and gratitude. "Your people," Sarah said carefully, "they must worry that you've brought me here, to a sacred place." Running Cloud was quiet for a moment, testing the temperature of a poultice before applying it to her burned arm. "Whitehawk, my teacher, he says wisdom knows no color. Healing is healing." He gestured to the burns. "These marks, they are not just on skin, they go deeper." Sarah thought of her father's disappointment, of Boston's stifling propriety, of all the invisible burns she'd carried west. "Yes," she whispered, "they do." Outside the grotto, they could hear the canyon awakening. Birds called to greet the sun, their songs echoing off red stone walls. A gentle breeze carried the scent of rain-washed sage and desert primrose. Here, away from the settler camp's rigid boundaries, time seemed to flow differently, like the water in the sacred pools. "Your journal survived?" Running Cloud said, indicating the leather-bound book he'd rescued alongside her. Its covers were smoke-stained, but intact. "You write many words." Sarah touched the journal's worn leather. "Words help me understand, see things clearly." She looked up at him. Would you tell me about your medicine ways? Not to write down," she added quickly, seeing his expression. "Just to understand." Running Cloud studied her for a long moment. The morning light caught the eagle, feather in his medicine bundle, making it shine like captured lightning. "Understanding comes first through heart, then head," he said finally. "Watch, listen, feel. Words come later." As if to emphasize his point, he began preparing another medicine treatment. Sarah watched his hands move with practiced grace, measuring, mixing, blessing each element. He worked in silence, but she could hear him breathing prayers or songs, under his breath, too soft to make out the words. The clay vessel made its rounds between different pools, gathering sacred waters. Running Cloud added herbs to some, stones to others. Each mixture seemed to follow an ancient recipe, written not on paper but in memory and spirit. "In your camp," he said as he worked, "they fear Apache ways. Think us savages." There was no bitterness in his voice, only a deep sadness. "They do not see that all healing comes from same source. Great Spirit gives many medicines, many paths. Sarah thought of Martha Whitaker's warnings, of the settler men's suspicious glares. "Fear makes people blind," she said softly, "makes them build walls instead of bridges." Running Cloud's hand stilled for a moment. White Hawk says same words. Perhaps spirits speak through both old Apache medicine man and young white woman. Eh? His eyes held a glimmer of amusement. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the steady drip of sacred waters and distant canyon wrens. Sarah felt the poultice working on her burns, drawing out heat and pain. But more than that, she felt something else healing, something that had been wounded long before she ever came west. "Your people," she said finally, "will they be searching for you? My people know I walk with Spirit's guidance." He touched his medicine bundle. "But your people, they will search. Already I hear them in canyon." As if confirming his words, a distant shout echoed off the stone walls. Sarah recognized James Cooper's voice calling her name. The world beyond the grotto suddenly seemed very real and very close. "They think you've kidnapped me," she said, the words tasting bitter. "They won't understand." Understanding comes, slow, like water-shaping stone. Running Cloud began gathering his medicines, but first drops have fallen, seeds planted. He helped her to stand, steady despite her injuries. "Now we must face their fear with truth." Sarah looked around the sacred grotto one last time, trying to memorize every detail, the play of light on ancient walls, the soft music of dripping water, the peace she'd found here. Will I see this place again?" Running Cloud secured his medicine bundle, the eagle feather dancing in the strengthening breeze. "Spirits have marked us both with lightning's touch." He touched the scorched leather of his bundle. "Path between worlds, opened now, cannot be closed." Another shout echoed through the canyon. Closer now. Sarah squared her shoulders, drawing strength from the sacred water's song. Together they stepped out of the grotto and into the harsh light of morning, carrying within them seeds of change that would soon shake both their worlds to their foundations. The moon rose full and bright over the canyon rim, casting silver light across the settlement's tense gathering. Sarah sat before the council fire, her burns wrapped in Running Cloud's poultices, a visible blend of Apache herbs and white man's medicine that seemed to make everyone uncomfortable. James Cooper stood beside her, his weathered face caught between concern and confusion. "Miss Mitchell," he said, choosing his words carefully, "while we're grateful for the Indians' help during the storm, surely you understand our concerns. These medicines he's using—" "Saved my life," Sarah finished firmly, touching the bundle of healing herbs at her neck. The scent of sage and sweetgrass mixed with the sharp tang of antiseptic, bridging worlds with every breath. Martha Whitaker clutched her shawl tighter, though the night was warm. "It's not proper," she whispered loudly. "A woman of your breeding, accepting savage remedies. What would your father say?" Sarah thought of the sacred grotto, of ancient waters dripping wisdom into stone bowls. "My father," she said quietly, "taught me that true learning knows no boundaries." Running Cloud stood at the edge of the firelight, his medicine bundle glowing softly in the moon's radiance. The eagle feather caught the wind, dancing like a spirit made visible. White Hawk had arrived at sunset, his blind eyes somehow seeing more than those with sight. The old medicine man now sat cross-legged near the fire, smoking his sacred pipe. "The lightning speaks truth," White Hawk said in English that surprised the settlers with its clarity. "It marks paths between worlds. Some see only burns to heal, others see deeper medicine at work." Sarah watched the smoke from his pipe curl skyward, carrying prayers to the stars. She remembered the morning ceremony, how White Hawk had blessed the healing herbs while Running Cloud translated the ancient words, "These plants carry Earth Mother's love, Sky Father's strength. When we heal the body, we must heal the spirit also. Lightning chose you, daughter of the East." Such choosing carries purpose. Now in the council fire's glow, Sarah felt that purpose stirring like wind through canyon stones. The settlers shifted uneasily as Whitehawk began a soft chant, his voice carrying power that needed no translation. Running Cloud moved forward, his steps deliberate. "My teacher speaks of bridges," he said, "of paths opening between peoples. The storm brought more than lightning. It brought change." "Change?" Cooper frowned. "What kind of change?" "The kind that comes when walls fall," Sarah answered, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "When we learn to see with new eyes." Whitehawk nodded, passing his pipe to Running Cloud. The younger man took it with reverence, drawing smoke and releasing it to the 4 directions before speaking again. "Tomorrow, we begin traditional healing ceremony. 4 days, 4 nights. Each day for one direction, one element, one aspect of wholeness." He looked at Sarah. "If you are willing." The settlers erupted in protests. Martha Whitaker nearly swooned. Cooper raised his hands for silence, his face troubled. "Miss Mitchell, you can't seriously consider—" "I do more than consider," Sarah interrupted. She stood, letting her shawl fall away to reveal the lightning's marks on her arm. In the firelight, the burns seemed to form patterns like the petroglyphs in the sacred grotto. "I accept." Whitehawk's blind eyes crinkled with something like triumph. From his medicine bag, he withdrew a small bundle wrapped in softest buckskin. "Then accept also this," he said, holding it out. Sarah took it carefully, unwrapping the leather to reveal a collection of healing herbs, unlike any she'd seen before. Some she recognized from Running Cloud's treatments: sage, cedar, desert flowers dried in the sun. Others were strange to her, their fragrances exotic and powerful. "These medicines," Whitehawk explained, "are sacred to my people. They teach as they heal. Listen to their songs with your heart, and they will show you the path between worlds." Running Cloud stepped forward, adding something to the bundle, a small clay jar of the sacred spring's water. Their fingers brushed as he handed it to her, and Sarah felt energy spark between them like echo of lightning. "The ceremony requires trust," he said softly, "from both sides." The settlers watched in uneasy silence as Sarah tucked the medicine bundle into her skirts. She could feel their fear, their confusion, their desperate clinging to familiar ways. But the lightning had burned away her own fears, leaving behind a clarity sharp as desert stars. "I trust," she said, loud enough for all to hear. "Do you?" The question hung in the air like smoke from Whitehawk's pipe. Cooper looked from Sarah to Running Cloud to the old medicine man, his face a study in internal struggle. Finally he spoke. 4 days, he said heavily, "but we'll need assurances, conditions." Whitehawk tapped his pipe against his palm, emptying the sacred tobacco. "The only condition healing needs is an open heart," he said. "The rest is just noise in the wind." Sarah felt something shift in the air, not just around the council fire, but in the canyon itself. The ancient stones seemed to lean closer, listening. The stars burned brighter. Even the wind held its breath. Running Cloud's medicine bundle glowed stronger, the eagle feather trembling with power. Tomorrow, the real healing would begin. Not just of lightning's burns, but of wounds far older and deeper. Wounds that ran through both their peoples like hidden canyons. Whitehawk rose, his movements fluid despite his age. "The spirits are satisfied," he announced. "They have shown the path. Now we must be brave enough to walk it." Sarah touched her own medicine bundle, feeling the power pulse within like a second heartbeat. The healing herbs sang their strange songs to her blood, and somewhere in the darkness, thunder rolled distant approval. The walls between worlds grew thinner with every breath. Dawn painted the canyon walls with fingers of rose and gold as Sarah knelt beside Running Cloud at the ceremonial circle. 2 days into the healing ritual, her burns were already showing remarkable improvement, but the deeper transformation was happening in ways no physical eye could see. Whitehawk had drawn the circle at sunrise the first day, using sacred cornmeal and crushed turquoise. At its center burned a small fire of Cedar and pinon pine, its smoke carrying prayers skyward. Around the circle's edge lay 4 stones, each representing a direction, a season, an element of healing. East stone for spring, Running Cloud explained, his voice soft in the morning stillness. For new beginnings, like dawn. He touched a string of beads at his wrist, blue, white, and copper, that Sarah hadn't noticed before. Each color tells story, holds medicine. Sarah found herself studying his hands as he worked, strong but gentle, equally comfortable wielding healing herbs or guiding horses through treacherous passes. A silver ring on his index finger caught her attention, its design unlike anything she'd seen in Boston's finest shops. "My mother's work," he said, noticing her gaze. "She was silversmith before the fever took her. Taught me that beauty is medicine too." He twisted the ring thoughtfully. "Said every piece must tell truth, or metal will not sing." "Sing?" Sarah asked, genuinely curious. Running Cloud smiled, touching the ring to his medicine bundle. A clear, pure note rang out, hanging in the air like morning mist. "Metal remembers," he said, "like water, like stone, like heart." Sarah found herself reaching for her own necklace, a simple silver cross her mother had given her before consumption claimed her. "My mother believed in beautiful things too," she said softly. "She taught music in Boston, said harmony could heal broken spirits." "Ah." Whitehawk's voice came from behind them, making Sarah start slightly. The old medicine man moved like smoke when he wished to. "So the mothers speak across the stars, teaching same wisdom in different words." He settled beside them, his blind. He's focused on something beyond physical sight. "Show her the weaving song, Running Cloud." From his medicine bundle, Running Cloud drew out a small wooden loom, strung with threads of various colors. With practiced movements, he began to weave, his fingers dancing across the strings in a rhythm that seemed to match the morning bird songs. "Each pattern tells story," he explained as he worked. "This one," he indicated a zigzag of blue and white, "speaks of lightning's path between earth and sky, and this, a series of interlocked diamonds in copper and black, shows how all things connect, all medicines flow together." Sarah watched, fascinated, as a pattern emerged that seemed to capture the very essence of their shared experience. Lightning, healing waters, sacred ceremony, all woven into a single harmonious design. Without thinking, she reached out to touch. The weaving, her fingers brushing Running Clouds in the process. The contact sent a jolt through both of them, like static electricity, but warmer, deeper. Their eyes met over the loom, and for a moment the morning stood still. Whitehawk's soft chuckle broke the spell. "Weaving happens in many ways," the old man said cryptically, "some with thread, some with medicine, some with heartstrings." He reached into his own medicine bag and withdrew a bracelet of intricate beadwork. This was waiting to be made since before storm came. Now its time is here. The bracelet seemed to capture sunlight in its depths. Blue beads like sacred spring water, white like lightning's flash, copper like desert sunrise. And running, through it all, a thread of deep red, the color of the canyon stone itself. "For building bridges," Whitehawk said, holding it out to Sarah, "for walking between worlds." Sarah accepted the bracelet with trembling fingers. As she slipped it onto her wrist, she felt something shift inside her, like puzzle pieces falling into place, like music finding its resolution. Running Cloud watched her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "The beads speak truth," he said quietly, "like mother's silver ring, like healing songs, like heart." From the settler camp below, the morning bell rang out, a sharp reminder of the other world waiting beyond their ceremonial circle. Sarah knew Martha Whitaker and her gossips would be watching, counting the hours she spent in heathen ritual. Even James Cooper's patience grew strained, though he kept his word about allowing the ceremony. But here in the circle, with morning light catching the smoke of sacred herbs, and White Hawk's soft chanting blending with canyon wrens, those concerns seemed to belong to another life entirely. The bracelet caught the sun, sending tiny rainbows dancing across her healing burns. "Tell me," she said to Running Cloud, "about the healing songs. Not to write down," she added, seeing his hesitation. "Just to hold in my heart." His face softened. From his medicine bundle, he drew out a small drum, not much larger than his palm. Its surface was painted with the same symbols that decorated the ceremonial circle. "Songs come from first times," he said, beginning a gentle rhythm. "When spirits taught people how to heal, how to pray, how to love, how to—" His voice joined the drum's voice, soft and deep like wind through ancient pines. Though Sarah couldn't understand the words, their meaning seemed to bypass her ears and speak directly to her soul. White Hawk's voice joined in harmony, and the smoke from the central fire twisted in patterns that matched the beadwork on her wrist. Sarah felt tears spring to her eyes, though she couldn't have said why. Something was opening inside her, like a flower reaching for the sun. Running Cloud's hand found hers, steady and warm. "Some medicines," he said softly, "heal more than body. Some songs wake sleeping spirit. Some bridges once built cannot be broken." The morning light strengthened, setting the canyon walls ablaze. With color, far above, an eagle circled, its cry echoing off ancient stone. Sarah felt its freedom in her heart, matched by the steady pulse of Running Cloud's drum and the cool touch of White Hawk's beaded bracelet against her skin. Two worlds were meeting, not in conflict, but in harmony. And in that meeting, something new was being born, something as old as the canyon stones and as fresh as morning dew. The military dispatch arrived on the third day of the healing ceremony, carried by a dust-covered cavalry scout who looked like he'd ridden through the night. Sarah watched from the ceremonial circle as James Cooper read the letter, his face growing darker with each line. Even at this distance, she could see the official army seal in red wax, a spot of blood against the pale paper. Running Cloud noticed her distraction. He paused in preparing the morning's medicines, his hands hovering over the sacred herbs. "Bad news comes on west wind," he said quietly. "I feel it in the stones." White Hawk, who had been tending the ceremonial fire, lifted, his head like a deer scenting danger. "More than bad news," the old medicine man murmured. "Change rides with iron shoes, many horses." Sarah touched the beaded bracelet at her wrist, its colors seeming dimmer in the strange morning light. Below in the camp, Cooper was gathering. The other men, their voices carrying up the canyon in fragments. "Full company. Orders from Fort Apache. Securing the territory." Running Cloud's medicine bundle trembled slightly, the eagle feather dancing with agitation. He began packing away the most sacred items with swift, practiced movements. "Blue coats come," he said, his voice carefully neutral. "Many blue coats." "But why?" Sarah asked, though she feared she already knew. "The peace treaties." "Peace? Treaties change like wind," White Hawk interrupted. From his medicine bag, he withdrew a small wooden box decorated with symbols of protection. "White man's words on paper blow away too easily. Only words written in heart stand strong." Cooper's voice rose from below. "Miss Mitchell, a word if you please." Sarah stood, brushing sacred cornmeal from her skirts. The burns on her arm had faded to pink new skin, but she felt a deeper ache building, one no medicine could touch. "I should go see what's happening." Running Cloud caught her hand before she could leave the circle. His touch was brief but electric, sending warmth straight to her heart. "Be careful with your words," he warned. "Some truths are not ready to be heard." Down in the settlement, Sarah found the men gathered around Cooper's wagon. The military dispatch lay open on a crate, its official letterhead stark in the morning sun. Cooper's face was troubled as he turned to her. "Miss Mitchell, I need you to be clear about something," he said without preamble. "These past days, up there with the Apache, have you been held against your will? Any form of coercion or threat? What? No. Sarah's denial came sharp and immediate. The ceremony is healing me. Running Cloud and White Hawk have shown nothing but wisdom and... That's not how the army sees it, Cooper interrupted, tapping the dispatch. Word got to Fort Apache about a white woman being taken by Indians during the storm. They're sending a full company to secure the situation. His mouth twisted on the formal phrases. Captain Harrison and his men will be here by sunset tomorrow. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. Captain James Harrison. She knew that name from newspaper accounts. Known for his efficient handling of the Apache problem. A man who saw only threats to be eliminated, never bridges to be built. But surely once we explain what? Martha Whitaker's voice cut in like a knife. How you've been consorting with savages, participating in heathen rituals. Why, just look at those native trinkets you're wearing. She pointed accusingly at the beaded bracelet. Your poor father would die of shame. Sarah's hand covered the bracelet protectively. My father taught me to seek truth wherever it may be found. These trinkets represent healing wisdom far older than our own. That's enough. Cooper's voice was gentle but firm. Sarah, I understand you feel grateful to the Apache for helping during the storm. But with the army coming, things have to change. The healing ceremony ends now. We can't risk any misunderstandings. Above them, White Hawk's morning song drifted down like smoke on the wind. Sarah thought of the sacred circle, of Running Cloud's careful teachings, of mysteries only half revealed. You don't understand, she began. No, you don't understand, Martha snapped. That Indian scout may have saved you from lightning, but now he's endangering all of us. If Captain Harrison finds him here, finds you with him, then what? Sarah demanded. He's done nothing wrong. Nothing but share healing wisdom that our own doctors could learn from, if they'd only... Miss Mitchell. Cooper's interruption was quiet but final. The army won't see it that way. They'll see a white woman being held by Indians, being influenced by their ways. There could be repercussions for everyone. The threat hung in the air like storm clouds building. Sarah looked back up toward the ceremonial circle, where Running Cloud and White Hawk were now mounting their horses. The medicine bundle still hung at Running Cloud's side, but even at this distance, she could see the eagle feather trembling. The ceremony isn't finished, she said softly. There's one more day. The ceremony is over. Cooper's tone left. No room for argument. For everyone's safety, Miss Mitchell, including theirs. Sarah watched as Running Cloud raised his hand in farewell, or perhaps warning. White Hawk sat straight in his saddle, blind eyes somehow finding her across the distance. Their horses turned toward the deeper canyon lands, carrying medicines and mysteries with them. But the beaded bracelet still circled her wrist, its colors catching the sun like captured flames. And in her heart, Sarah felt something that no army company could touch. A bridge built of shared wisdom, of lightning's touch, of songs older than the canyon stones themselves. You're wrong, she whispered, though no one was listening anymore. The ceremony isn't over. It's only beginning. Above them all, an eagle circled against the morning sky, its cry echoing off ancient walls, like a prophecy, or perhaps a promise. That night, under a moon thin as a broken peace pipe, Sarah made her way to the ceremonial circle. The sacred cornmeal lines still glowed faintly in the starlight, and the scent of cedar lingered in the air. But something else drew her here, a presence she felt more than saw. Running Cloud emerged from the shadows like a spirit, his medicine bundle dark against his chest. The eagle feather caught starlight, trembling with urgent energy. You should not be here, he said softly. Army scouts ride ahead of main force. Already they watch. I know. Sarah touched the beaded bracelet, drawing courage from its colors. That's why I had to come, to warn you. It's worse than we thought. From her pocket she drew a crumpled letter, one that had fallen from Cooper's wagon when the men were dispersing. In the moonlight, its words seemed to writhe like snakes. A Apache scout known as Running Cloud, suspected of inflammatory activities. Immediate apprehension. Example must be made. Running Cloud read the words slowly, his face unreadable. Captain Harrison has long memory, he said finally. 3 summers ago, I guided Army patrol to water, led them away from Hidden Canyon, where my people sheltered. Captain never forgave deception. They mean to arrest you on sight, Sarah whispered. And White Hawk, they'll hold him responsible too. You have to... A twig snapped in the darkness. Running Cloud moved like lightning, pulling Sarah behind a boulder as torchlight suddenly flooded the ceremonial circle. Voices carried up from multiple directions, Army scouts mixed with settler men. There, by the ritual circle. Spread out, don't let him escape. The woman's with him, just like Harrison said she would be. Sarah's heart froze. The trap had been laid not just for Running Cloud, but for her as well. Her warning had played straight into their plans. Running Cloud's hand found hers in the darkness. You didn't know, he said, not a question, but a certainty. In that moment of betrayal, he chose to trust her still. No, she breathed. I swear, by all that's sacred, I didn't know. The medicine bundle pulsed between them like a second heart. White Hawk's teachings echoed in Sarah's mind. Sometimes the greatest medicine comes from broken trust, healed stronger. More torches appeared, surrounding the ceremonial circle. Captain Harrison's voice cut through the night. Running Cloud, we know you're here. Surrender now, and the woman won't be charged as an accomplice. Sarah felt Running Cloud tense beside her. His medicine bundle trembled, the eagle feather dancing wildly now. She knew he could slip away into the darkness. His knowledge of the canyon was second only to White Hawk's, but that would mean leaving her to face Harrison's judgment alone. Go, she whispered. I'll tell them I came alone, that I never... No more lies, Running Cloud interrupted. No more walls between worlds. From his medicine bundle, he drew out something that glowed softly in the darkness, a small clay pot of sacred spring water. Truth is strongest medicine. Before Sarah could stop him, he stood, stepping into the torchlight. I am here, Captain Harrison. The army officer emerged from the shadows, his uniform pristine, even at this hour. 2 soldiers flanked him, rifles ready. Step away from the woman, Scout. The woman has name, Running Cloud said calmly. Has spirit, has power to choose. Sarah stood then too, her decision made. She moved to Running Cloud's side, the beaded bracelet flashing defiance in the torchlight. I choose to stand here, she declared, of my own free will. Harrison's face darkened. Miss Mitchell, you're under the influence of native ceremonies and medicines. Step aside, and we'll get you proper medical attention. Proper? Sarah's laugh held no humor. Look at my burns, Captain. Look how they've healed. The Apache medicines are forbidden by Army regulation, Harrison snapped, as is unauthorized contact with hostile tribes. Running Cloud, you're under arrest for kidnapping, sedition, and practicing medicine without proper authority. The only hostility here comes from your guns, Sarah countered. He saved my life, taught me healing wisdom our doctors could learn. From, if you'd only... Enough! Harrison gestured to his men. Take them both. We'll sort this out at the fort. But as the soldiers moved forward, something extraordinary happened. The sacred spring water in Running Cloud's clay pot began to glow brighter, and a wind that shouldn't have existed in the still canyon night swirled around them. The eagle feather in his medicine bundle stood straight up, pointing to the stars. White Hawk's voice carried from the darkness. Some medicines cannot be stopped by iron or law. The old medicine man appeared on the ridge above them, mounted, on his horse, blind eyes shining like mirrors in the torchlight. More shapes emerged from the shadows, tribal members on horseback, their presence previously hidden by skills, passed down through generations. Harrison's men raised their rifles, but the guns wouldn't fire, their powder mysteriously damp despite. The dry night, The sacred spring water glowed brighter still, and Sarah felt power pulse through the beaded bracelet like living lightning. "Choose now," Running Cloud said softly. "All of you. Stand with fear or stand with healing." Sarah felt the moment balance on a knife's edge. Here was the real medicine being made, not in herbs or ceremonies, but in human hearts facing ancient fears. She touched the cross at her neck, her mother's silver catching the same light as Running Cloud's medicine bundle. "There is only one choice," she said clearly. "The same choice Running Cloud made during the storm. To save, to heal, to build bridges." Something shifted in the night air. The torches flickered, and for a moment, everyone present, army men, settlers, Apache alike, seemed to see with different eyes. The ceremonial circle glowed brighter, its ancient patterns speaking of harmony older than any human conflict. Harrison looked from Sarah to Running Cloud to the useless rifles, his certainty cracking like dry earth before rain. "This is irregular," he managed. "Life is irregular, Captain," Whitehawk called down. "Medicine comes in many forms. Choose. Wisdom over fear, and all may yet heal." The night held its breath, waiting for Harrison's choice. And in that waiting, Sarah felt the truth of all Running Cloud had taught her. Some medicines worked not on the body, but on the soul. Some bridges, once built, could never be broken. The sacred spring water glowed like captured starlight, offering its wisdom to all who were ready to see. Dawn broke blood-red over the canyon, painting the rocks with ominous light. In the Apache camp, hidden deep within the sacred lands, Running Cloud prepared his war medicine. Not for fighting, he had explained to Sarah, but for protection, ancient powers that might turn bullets to dust and hatred to understanding. Whitehawk sat nearby, grinding minerals for war paint while singing songs that made the very air vibrate with power. The old medicine man's blind eyes seemed to see into other worlds as he worked, his gnarled fingers sorting sacred pigments. "By touch alone, red for blood that runs in all people," he murmured, mixing the paint with sacred spring water. "White for wisdom that comes from spirits, black for night that holds mysteries, yellow for dawn that brings new beginning." Sarah watched as Running Cloud knelt to receive the paint, her heart aching with the gravity of the moment. The military camp had grown overnight, more soldiers arriving with each hour. Harrison had given them until noon to surrender, a deadline that carried dark promises in its wake. "They'll never understand," she whispered, touching the beaded bracelet that now seemed to pulse with its own heartbeat. "They see only what their fear lets them see." Running Cloud turned to her, his face transformed by the sacred patterns Whitehawk had painted. "Understanding comes not from eyes," he said softly, "but from heart. Your presence here proves this." From his medicine bundle, he drew out small pouches of colored powder, medicines prepared through the night. "Each medicine has purpose," he explained, laying them in a circle, "like colors of dawn, like seasons of year, like directions of wind." Sarah recognized some of the herbs they contained: sage for cleansing, cedar for prayer, sweet grass for healing. Others were mysteries, their powers known only to those who walked the medicine path. All had been blessed with sacred spring water, all had been sung over through the dark hours. Whitehawk's voice rose in the morning air. "Time of choosing comes with sun. Harrison must face his own medicine." In the distance, military drums began their morning cadence. Sarah thought of her father's library in Boston, of scientific books that claimed to hold all knowledge. How little they knew of the real medicine that lived in these canyon lands. Running Cloud stood, his painted face catching the red dawn light. The eagle feather in his medicine bundle danced with supernatural energy, and the sacred spring water in its clay vessel glowed like captured lightning. "Last night," he said, "spirits showed path. Now we must be brave enough to walk it." Sarah touched the silver cross at her neck, feeling its power merge with the beaded bracelet's energy. "Whatever comes," she promised, "I stand with healing." Whitehawk nodded approval, adding the final marks to Running Cloud's ritual paint. "Two worlds meet in you," he told Sarah. "Bridge built by lightning's touch grows stronger with each breath." The sun climbed higher, its light transforming from blood red to brilliant gold. Soon Harrison would expect their answer to his demands. Soon the medicine they had prepared through the night would be tested. Running Cloud took Sarah's hand, his touch electric through the paint. "Medicine strongest when freely chosen," he said. "You can still return to your people, walk safer path." But Sarah stood straighter, feeling the power of Whitehawk's songs running through her blood. "My path was chosen when lightning struck," she replied. "Some medicines heal more than burns." The old medicine man's blind eyes crinkled with knowing. "So be it," he said, reaching for his sacred pipe. "Let us send our prayers to the dawn. What comes next is in Spirit's hands." As the pipe was lit and the first prayers rose with its smoke, Sarah felt the truth settle in her heart like ancient stone. Here, in this hidden canyon, with war paint drying in the morning sun and sacred medicines singing their power, she had found something worth any price. The drums from Harrison's camp grew louder, but they could not drown out the deeper rhythms of Whitehawk's healing songs. The time of choosing approached with the climbing sun, carrying medicines more powerful than any rifle's thunder. As the sun climbed toward its zenith, Whitehawk brought out the sacred drum. Its surface was worn smooth by generations of medicine songs, its wooden frame darkened by ceremonial smoke. The old man cradled it like a living thing, which, Sarah realized, perhaps it was. "This drum remembers all songs," Whitehawk explained, his blind eyes distant with vision. "Songs of war, songs of peace, songs of healing. Today it will help us sing new song, one that builds bridges stronger than any wall." Running Cloud knelt before his teacher, the morning light catching the patterns painted on his skin. Each line and symbol seemed to shift and move with its own life, telling stories older than the canyon stones. The eagle feather in his medicine bundle trembled with anticipation. "Before war party rides, warriors must dance," Whitehawk announced. "Not for battle, but for transformation. Today we dance to change hearts, not to take lives." The drums' first beat echoed off the canyon walls like distant thunder. Other drums joined in, smaller ones carried by tribal members who had gathered through the morning. Their rhythms wove together, creating patterns that Sarah felt in her bones. Running Cloud began to dance, his movements fluid as desert wind. The sacred medicines in his bundle caught the light, flashing like captured lightning. Each step seemed to draw power from the earth itself. Each gesture spoke of bridges between worlds. Whitehawk's voice rose above the drums, singing in the ancient language of his people. Though Sarah couldn't understand the words, their meaning bypassed her ears and spoke directly to her heart. She found herself swaying, the beaded bracelet at her wrist pulsing in time with the ceremonial rhythms. "Join Circle," Running Cloud called to her, his voice carrying power that made the air shimmer. "Medicine needs all hearts, all spirits." Sarah stepped forward without hesitation. The drums spoke to something deeper than her Boston upbringing, something older than the divide between their peoples. As she moved into the dance, she felt her mother's silver cross and Whitehawk's beaded bracelet humming in harmony. "See how medicines blend." Whitehawk's voice carried through the rhythm. "Silver cross sings with sacred beads, drums speak with cavalry bugles, hearts find common rhythm." The dance grew more intense. Running Cloud's movements became faster, more powerful, raising dust that caught the sunlight like golden mist. Sarah followed as best she could, letting the drums guide her. Around them, other tribal members joined the circle, their own medicine bundles adding their songs to the ceremony. From the military camp below, a bugle called out. But here in the sacred circle, its notes seemed to weave into the drum's voice, creating something new. Neither fully Apache nor fully white man's music, but a bridge between them. "Now, final medicine," Whitehawk announced. From his own bundle, he drew out a ceramic vessel painted with symbols of transformation. Sacred water blessed by lightning's touch, carried through generations for moment of great change. Running Cloud paused in his dance, chest heaving, war paint glistening with effort. The old medicine man dipped his fingers in the sacred water and traced new symbols on his student's forehead, symbols of protection, of wisdom, of power to open closed hearts. Then, to Sarah's surprise, White Hawk turned to her. "Bridgewalker needs medicine too," he said, drawing the same symbols on. Her skin, the water felt electric, alive with possibilities. The drums reached a crescendo as the sun touched its highest point. In that moment, Sarah felt something shift, not just in the air around them, but in the very fabric of reality. The beaded bracelet flashed with inner fire, the silver cross sang its own harmony, and the sacred medicines in Running Cloud's bundle pulsed like captured stars. "It is done," White Hawk announced as the drums faded to silence. "Medicine has been made. Now we carry it to those who need it most." Running Cloud stood straight, his painted face both fierce and compassionate. "Whatever comes," he said softly, meeting Sarah's eyes, "remember this moment. Remember how medicines can blend, how hearts can change, how bridges can stand stronger than walls." The bugle called again from below, its notes carrying Harrison's ultimatum. But Sarah felt no fear now. The ceremony had transformed them all, preparing them for whatever was to come. In the sudden quiet, White Hawk's drum offered one final, solitary beat, like a heart opening to new truth. They descended from the sacred grounds like a vision from another world. Running Cloud in his medicine paint leading the way, Sarah at his side, and White Hawk following on his horse, blind eyes seeing far beyond the physical realm. The morning ceremony still hummed in their blood, and the sacred medicines in Running Cloud's bundle sang with barely contained power. Captain Harrison waited at the edge of the settlement, his sword catching harsh sunlight. 24 soldiers flanked him, rifles ready. Behind them, the settlers gathered in uncertain clusters, with James Cooper standing apart, his weathered face troubled by what was to come. "This is your last chance, Running Cloud," Harrison called out, his voice carrying the weight of military authority. "Surrender the woman and submit to arrest. There need be no bloodshed." Running Cloud's response was to reach into his medicine bundle and draw out the clay vessel of sacred spring water. It glowed with inner light, making several soldiers step back in surprise. "You speak of surrender," he said calmly, "but you do not know what that word truly means. To surrender is to open heart to new truth, to let go of fear that builds walls." Sarah moved forward, the beaded bracelet at her wrist flashing like captured lightning. "Captain Harrison, you must listen. What you see as threat is really healing. What you fear as savage medicine is wisdom our own doctors could learn from. Miss Mitchell," Harrison's voice carried practiced patience, "you've been subjected to native influences and ceremonies. Your judgment is compromised." "My judgment has never been clearer," Sarah countered. She held up her arm, showing the nearly healed lightning burns. "Look, what your doctor said would take months to heal, their medicines accomplished in days." A murmur ran through the settlers. Martha Whitaker pushed forward, pointing accusingly at Sarah's painted forehead. "She's been marked with their heathen symbols. They've bewitched her." But James Cooper stepped forward, his voice cutting through the growing tension. "Wait. I've watched this past week, seen the healing with my own eyes. Maybe we should—" "Enough!" Harrison's sword flashed as he raised it. "Running Cloud, you are charged with practicing medicine without authority, interfering with military operations, and corrupting a white woman with native ceremonies. Surrender now, or face the consequences." The air grew heavy, like the moment. Before a storm breaks, White Hawk began to sing softly, his voice carrying power that made the horses nervous. The sacred spring water in Running Cloud's hands glowed brighter. "You speak of authority," Running Cloud said, his painted face catching the sun's fire. But what authority commands the lightning? What military power controls the healing springs? Some medicines come from source deeper than any human law. As if in response, clouds began gathering overhead. Impossible clouds in the clear summer sky. The settlers pointed and whispered as shadows raced across the canyon walls. "Black magic!" Martha Whitaker shrieked. "They're calling up their heathen powers!" But Sarah felt the truth of what was happening. The same power that had drawn lightning to her tent, that had guided Running Cloud to save her, that had begun the healing between worlds. It was gathering again. The beaded bracelet grew warm against her skin, harmonizing with her mother's silver cross. "Captain Harrison," she said, her voice carrying unexpected authority, "you stand at a crossroads. You can choose to be part of the healing, or you can choose to make wounds deeper." Thunder rolled across the canyon, though the strange clouds had yet to cover the sun. Several soldiers looked up nervously, then back to their captain. Harrison's sword wavered slightly. "This is your doing," he accused Running Cloud. "Some Apache trick." "No trick," Whitehawk called out, his blind eyes reflecting the gathering storm. "Medicine older than all our divisions. Lightning comes again to break down walls." The sacred spring water in Running Cloud's hands now glowed like captured daylight. The symbols painted on his skin seemed to move with their own life, telling stories of healing, of transformation, of bridges built between worlds. "Choose," Running Cloud said simply. The moment balanced on a knife's edge. Sarah felt destiny gathering like the storm above them. Whatever happened next would change everything, not just for them, but for all who witnessed this meeting of medicines, this confluence of powers. Thunder spoke again, closer now, as Harrison raised his sword to give the command that would set the day's course in motion. Lightning split the impossible sky, striking the ground between the two groups with such force that Harrison's sword flew from his grip. The sacred spring water in Running Cloud's hands erupted with brilliant light, and Whitehawk's song rose above the thunder's voice. "Now!" Harrison shouted to his men. "Take them now!" But as the soldiers raised their rifles, something extraordinary happened. The lightning-struck earth began to glow, creating a luminous line that no one dared cross. The strange storm clouds swirled overhead, taking shapes that reminded Sarah of the petroglyphs in the sacred grotto, spirals of transformation, symbols of healing. Running Cloud stepped forward, his medicine paint blazing with inner fire. The eagle feather in his bundle stood straight up, pointing to the storm-dark sky. "These medicines were not meant for war," he declared, his voice carrying power that made the air shimmer. "They come to heal division, not create it." Sarah felt the beaded bracelet pulse against her wrist, its energy harmonizing with her mother's cross until both glowed like stars. Without fear, she stepped to Running Cloud's side, feeling the power flow through her. "Look!" she called to the settlers. "Look with your hearts, not your fears. This is what I learned in the healing ceremony, that there are medicines stronger than hatred, truths deeper than division." The sacred spring water in Running Cloud's hands began to spray outward in a fine mist, catching the strange stormlight and creating a rainbow that arched over them all. Where the drops fell, flowers burst from the dry earth, impossible blooms that shouldn't exist in the desert heat. Harrison stared at the blooming ground, his military certainty cracking. This cannot be." "What cannot be?" Whitehawk's voice carried ancient wisdom. "That medicine flows through all things? That healing knows no boundaries?" Old Medicine Man raised his hands to the storm-dark sky. "Lightning chose these two to build bridge between worlds. Will you tear down what spirits have blessed?" Thunder shook the canyon walls, and more lightning illuminated the clouds. In its flash, everyone present saw the truth painted in light. Running Cloud and Sarah standing together, their auras blending into something new, neither purely Apache nor purely white, but a harmony of both. Martha Whitaker fell to her knees, her fear transformed to wonder. James Cooper stepped forward, crossing the luminous line in the earth to stand beside Sarah. Other settlers followed, drawn by the power of the moment. "Captain," Cooper said softly, "I've lived in these territories 30 years, never seen medicine like this. Maybe it's time we learned instead of fought." The soldiers looked to Harrison, waiting for orders. But the captain stood transfixed, watching as more impossible flowers bloomed around his fallen sword. The blade had been transformed. Where it touched the earth, it had become a living thing, sprouting leaves of silver and gold. "Running Cloud, raise the vessel of sacred water high. Choose now," he called out. "All of you, choose which medicine you will carry, fear or healing, division or harmony." Lightning struck again, but this time it seemed to flow through Running Cloud himself, illuminating him from within. The medicine paint on his skin became pure light, and the eagle feather in his bundle transformed into a living eagle of flame that circled overhead. Sarah felt the power surge through her as well, the beaded bracelet and silver cross joining their songs in perfect harmony. In that moment, she understood what Whitehawk had meant about bridges between worlds. They weren't built of wood or stone, but of opened hearts and transformed spirits. Harrison looked at his transformed sword, then at his men's useless rifles, now wreathed in blooming vines. Finally, he looked at Running Cloud and Sarah, standing in their shared light. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "there are some medicines that transcend regulations." The storm began to ease, though the impossible flowers continued to bloom. Whitehawk's blind eyes crinkled with joy as he sang a song of gratitude, one that somehow everyone present could understand, regardless of language. "Lightning's children," the old medicine man declared, "have shown us new path. Now we must be brave enough to walk it." The sacred spring water's rainbow mist settled over them all like a blessing, and in its touch, ancient fears began to dissolve like morning dew. The bridge between worlds grew stronger with every breath, every opened heart, every transformed spirit. In the canyon's depths, thunder rolled one final time. Not in challenge now, but in celebration of medicines more powerful than any weapon, of healing deeper than any wound. In the quiet that followed the storm, Harrison's transformed sword became the first peace offering. The captain presented it to Running Cloud, its silver leaves still gleaming with supernatural light. "For the fort's medicine lodge," he said gruffly, "if you'll help us build one." Running Cloud accepted the blade-turned living thing with ceremony, touching it to his medicine bundle. The eagle feather quivered in response, scattering tiny sparks of remaining lightning into the air. "Two medicines growing together," he replied, "as it should be." Sarah watched as settlers and soldiers gathered the impossible flowers that had bloomed from the sacred spring water. Even Martha Whitaker held a blossom, her face softened with wonder. The rigid boundaries that had seemed so important mere hours ago now felt as insubstantial as morning mist. Whitehawk sat upon his horse, singing softly, a song of gratitude that somehow translated itself into every heart present. The old medicine man's blind eyes reflected a vision of the future, a fort where two healing traditions worked side by side, a settlement where ancient wisdom and new knowledge grew together like the silver leaves on Harrison's transformed sword. "The bridge is built," Whitehawk declared finally. "Now we must all learn to walk it." Around them, the impossible flowers continued to bloom, marking the path between worlds with living proof of lightning's medicine. 1 year later, Sarah stood in the doorway of the new medicine lodge, watching Running Cloud teach young army doctors about desert healing herbs. Her leather journal, still bearing scorch marks from the lightning strike, lay open beside a collection of traditional medicine bundles. Each page now held two kinds of wisdom, written side by side. The beaded bracelet at her wrist had been joined by a silver band, a wedding gift from Running Cloud's hands, shaped from Harrison's transformed sword. The impossible flowers still bloomed around the lodge, their petals used in both native remedies and modern tinctures. White Hawk sat in his usual place of honor, his blind eyes seeing far beyond the present moment. Lightning's medicine still. Works, he observed, touching the fresh herbs drying overhead. Still building bridges, still healing old wounds. Through the window, Sarah could see the fort's new trading post, where Apache healers and army physicians exchanged knowledge as easily as they exchanged remedies. Captain Harrison himself had become one of their strongest advocates, his own medicine kit now carrying both traditional and modern cures. 2 medicines, twice the healing, Running Cloud said, coming to stand beside her. The eagle feather in his bundle brushed her cheek softly, just as Lightning intended. Sarah smiled, touching the silver cross that now hung beside her own small medicine bundle. Some bridges, once built by Lightning's touch, only grew stronger with time.